We'll be starting the show in 1 minute. We'll be starting the show in 1 minute, just getting the simulcast stuff up. You guys, thank you for being here. We'll see you in a second. Hello, everyone. Welcome to YNS Live. And actually, now I don't know if you guys have heard, but we've rebranded. It's not YNS Live. It is Your Next Stop Live. So sorry, David, on that. All my NFL stuff is YNS. And hey, James. And I'm, with this things now that I am like far away from my computer, I need to see. There's also Golden. And we've had some people text me saying that they're listening. We see people on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. How are you guys? And Twitch. This is going to be a really exciting episode. I am excited. David and I don't even know, and David, I'm going to introduce you in a second, but we spoke months ago and have had this scheduled, and I've been looking forward to this show for a long time. So I want to welcome to Fireside Live on Your Next Stop, David Richman. He's an author, speaker, trainer, and consultant. How are you, David? Welcome.
I'm great. Good morning, Juliet. How are you?
I am really, really good. I'm excited for you to be here to share your story, because when we spoke, it was one of those things. It was like, okay, I think it was your PR. Was it your PR agency?
Yeah, that hooked us up for sure.
Yeah. And when you started telling me a little bit about your story and then the books, I was like, oh, pause. I don't want to know too much. I want to hear this unfold. But I know as I said that, then I think we continued to talk for like another 25 minutes, and it was supposed to be like a 5-minute call.
Yeah. Let's keep it going, man. I'm excited to talk to you. I was really looking forward to it.
Yes. So I would love for you to give a little background on who you are, what kind of your backstory is, and then we're going to get into all the stuff that you're doing now.
Sure. So, like you said, I'm an author. I love to write. That's what I do. Fiction, nonfiction, you name it. But I mean, there's not. I mean, it's a hard road, right? Because
Yes.
there's just so many books that come out. It's a tough road. But I love to write, and that's kind of the focus of my life. I do some public speaking. I teach expressive writing workshops, teaching people how to kind of rewire that inner brain and the inner voice that they have. And that's kind of where, I don't know, where my story kind of begins. It was like late 30s and finding out, that I needed to learn how to rewire that inside voice that was holding me back. And it was a pretty bad time. I think you and I talked about it where, I was in my late 30s. I'm overweight. I'm a smoker. I'm completely stressed out. I'm in an absolutely horrible, relationship. Married to an abusive alcoholic, and 4-year-old twins, just stressed out to the max, like you couldn't believe it. And I just heard the right words at the right time from a friend of mine who basically told me to stop naming everything that was a problem in my life and look in the mirror and fix that problem. And that kind of started me on the next phase of my life, or what I call kind of the first phase of my life. Like everything else led up to that point, but that was really the beginning of me kind of figuring out who I was.
Sorry, I muted for a second because I didn't want to cough. So anyone that can hear, I've got a little bit of a cold, and I'm going to mute a couple of times. But David, I think it was really important when we did speak, and you spoke about that because you also were in a job that you were stressed about. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I left home at 18 under very bad circumstances. And 3 days into being out on my own, I got robbed at gunpoint of everything that I owned. And I lived in my car, homeless, for a few days, less than $1 in my pocket, and nothing but a carton of cigarettes to eat, and nobody to call. And I mean, I was just, I was 12 years old mentally, and I just didn't know what the hell to do. And so every job that I ever got, I just worked my butt off and went crazy. Like I got to get out of this hole that I'm in. Like I never felt like anything I did was on purpose. The good thing is I learned how to get out of a lot of holes. I learned how to go into a room full of people and come out the winner. And that led me to, without an education, eventually running $100 million business for a major Wall Street firm, and being in charge of hundreds of employees and a major part of the P&L. And but that's not where I belonged, and I was completely stressed out. It's just that's where I was, but that was not on purpose. That was just survival mode. And
Right.
um, in the financial services business, of course, the financial crisis of 2008 and nine, really gave a wake up call to a lot of people. And it was a very bad time. It was a turbulent time, and one that just soured me to the corporate world and just said, man, I just not happy here.
Right. And I think that that was important. And you were in a bad marriage. You were working like crazy. You were looking for outlets. You were smoking. You were unhealthy.
Yep.
And then I remember you said it was kind of like you were waking up every day, being like, okay, it's another day. And then your friend said something to you that was really kind of a really important time in your life. Can you share that with us?
Yeah. Um, so it was a terrible time. I had twins that were not quite 5 years old. I was, afraid and reluctant to go home every day because I didn't know if, what the situation was at home was going to be. Work was absolutely miserable. With the financial crisis going on, I was dealing with suicide of employees, and I was just really, really just completely stressed out and terrible.
Oop, I think we lost you for a second. David, are you there? Can you guys hear me or can you not hear David? James, can you give a clap if you can hear me? Oh, we lost David. Okay, so David will be back in a moment. This is what happens with live shows, right? We we sometimes come in and out. So,
Dealing with,
oh, there
and
you are.
yeah, all the crap that I had to deal with, and he just looked at me and he went, "Dude, you're the problem." He goes, "Everything that you have in your life is like a wild animal." He goes,
Right,
"And you take that wild animal and you're like, oh, look at this cute little wild animal. And you take it home and you feed it and you clean it and you hang out with it. And then when you feel like it's okay to go pet it, it bites you. And you wonder, why the hell did it bite you?" And he goes, "Dude, wild animals are wild animals. Like bad people are bad people. They just don't know any better. Right? You should know better. Why don't you worry about like the guy in the mirror and you don't care about him? Right? Why don't you fix
right,
that?" And I mean, we hear what we hear when we hear it, right, Juliet?
totally.
And I of course I knew that my life was a shambles personally, but I didn't really know that I was the problem. I thought I was kind of the victim, or I was traumatized, or I made bad choices, or I just couldn't get good luck, or whatever.
Right. No,
Realized like,
wait,
no, that's not the truth. It was the guy. It was the guy in the mirror that was the problem.
right. Now, this friend, because we lost you for a second, I don't know if it was me or it was you, but this friend, was this someone that you knew for a long time or was it kind of a newer friend?
I'd known him for a long time, and we had had some good times together. And in the background, he knew that I was completely stressed out. I was running away from being my best self. I think he just got tired of me complaining
Right,
about all the other problems in my life. And he, again, like you just know what you know and you know it. Like how many times does somebody tell you something and you're like, you've heard it 100 times, but then on the 101st time you hear it, you're like, oh, that makes sense.
right,
I mean, that's just the way we live in denial. We're too busy. We just don't focus in. It's not the right set of circumstances or whatever. But I was at the lowest point of my life that I could remember in decades. I mean, being homeless and having a gun in your face at 18 is pretty low, but I mean, I was at a low point, and I guess my receptors were open to realize that maybe I was the guy that needed fixing, not everybody else.
right. And you said, I mean, the fact that you were in an abusive relationship, but kind of like, okay, this is what it is, as you said, being homeless and with the gun in your face, that's you having to control. Now you have other people that you also are responsible for. And, you have found work that you don't love, but you're successful at it. So that's a feeling that, it's like, okay, I like this feeling of being successful, but do I like what I'm doing every day? And so you have a lot of things that are pulling at you, tugging at you, pushing you away, bringing you in. And I think there's a lot of people out there that can really relate to that at some point of their life where that has happened. So when your friend said that to you, what was your next step there?
My next step was to jump up and want to take him down to the mat because I'm like, dude, how could I be the problem? Right.
Right.
Like, you're an idiot. Like, why would you say that? Like, there's no way I'm the problem. And I started going over all the issues again. And he's like, blah, 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 dude, heard it all the time. Like, I've heard it for years from you.
Right.
And I don't know. I guess it was just time for me to just hear it. So the next couple of days, I kind of walked around in a daze going, well, all right, he's a smart guy, and I guess he cares about me. And I never really thought about it this way, and it kind of weighed on me. And people think that this is trite because they're like, you actually didn't do this. This sounds stupid. You're sounding ridiculous. But I actually said, all right, I gotta fix this. I gotta change this. And within that few days, my whole life was coming to a head. I was without going into details, I got the leverage I needed to get in order to take my kids and get us out of that situation, at least, just to safety.
Yeah.
And so I found us a place and got us into a place. And I think it was right around the day or two before that I had this talk with Chris. And then at the same time, my sister called me, told me she's got some medical issues, and she doesn't know how bad they are, but she'll let me know what they are. They end up being, pretty bad. We'll talk about that in a moment. And it just hit me. If I was the dude that needed fixing, I better figure it out. So I put the kids to bed, Juliet, and I know it sounds stupid, but I actually did this. I went to the bathroom, I closed the door, I turned the light on, I looked in the mirror, and I said, all right, dude, what's going on? And I wanted to look away. I wanted to not talk to myself in the mirror because I looked like an idiot. And I just had a one-on-one with myself for like an hour. First time ever.
Right. Now, do you think that your kids were a huge driving force because you wanted something better for them?
They were. I had a kind of quiet confidence, Juliet, that I was going to be a good parent because I didn't have good parents, and I knew I was going to do exactly the opposite.
Yep.
And I left a home with a horrible parent, and I knew I was going to do exactly the opposite. So I knew I was going to be a good parent, um, but what the driver was with the smoking was my daughter. So my twins were about 4. They were just doing what 4-year-olds do, like nursery school, preschool, whatever they were doing, and within that same time frame of that couple of days of like that's the turning point of my life, we found out that my sister had terminal brain cancer. Then my daughter comes home from school one day, and I'm out in the back having a cigarette, and she goes, it'd be nice if you didn't smoke. And because Aunt June's going to die of cancer, and smoking will give you cancer. That's what teacher says. So why don't you not smoke? And I
Oh.
went, oh, all of this, like all of these like massive like lightning bolts happened within, I'm going to say within 4 or 5 days, right? Just massive, like lightning bolt after lightning bolt after lightning bolt. And I feel like when you're vulnerable, when you're open to what the universe is trying to tell you, you can never hear it, which is fine. Or if you start to hear it, it kind of cracks it open, and then everything just crashes down. And it all just crashed down at me at one time. My daughter telling me to quit smoking, me feeling the freedom of not being in an abusive relationship, knowing that I got my kids to safety, my friend telling me, dude, you're the problem, my sister saying I got terminal cancer. And it's like, I'm looking in the mirror going like, what the F? Like, who
Right.
are you? Like, literally, what the hell is going on here? Who are
Right.
you and who do you want to be? And I didn't have any answers.
It's so interesting. I was just one of my clients, she and I were just talking, and she had some like crazy things happen to her, like all kind of in a very short span. And what I always believe, like universe, God, whatever you believe in,
Mhm.
sometimes when you are not on the path that you're supposed to be on, huge things happen, right? Like, I believe in God, but whether it's the universe and God coming together, it's like, okay, I need to wake this guy up. I need to do some big things to shake him, to be like, okay, you need to get out of what you're doing because this is not what you are meant to do. You are meant for
Yeah.
bigger things. And not everyone can handle that, right? I also believe like the universe is not going to give you what you can't handle. I really believe that. And some of us have had more down in our lives, but have picked ourselves up like you have done.
Mhm.
So, right, your daughter comes out and says this to you. Like, can you stop smoking? I mean, it's really a matter of fact. Like, we just heard, Aunt June's going to die. What are you
Right.
doing?
Right.
How did you feel?
I thought it was pretty profound of her
Yeah.
because I mean, literally, my kids weren't 5 yet, and I'm like, wow, man, like that kind of awareness, that kind of that even if she had no idea that she was being that aware and that profound, it just hit me, and I think I was at such a raw point where I was pretty desolate, thinking just a few days before that I'm never going to get out of this situation. I'm never going to be able to protect myself or my kids. The weight of the stress is going to kill me. I was absolutely at a low point. So to maybe gain one step forward, to have safety for me and my kids, maybe another step forward, to have a friend care about me and talk to me in a way that I'd never been talked to take another step forward, to realize, man, I got to get out of my own head and worry about my sister, and just like one thing after another made me just believe like, all right, maybe I matter. And
Right.
And I know that sounds stupid. And I mean, look, I had learned so many unbelievably valuable lessons, digging myself out of holes, accomplishing a ton in my life. But I just never knew how to apply them to me. It's like I walked around looking at the ground with blinders on and just fixing whatever came into my view. And then if I didn't have a problem, I'd go try to find it so I could fix it. Right. I
Right.
never I mean, the analogy is I never applied the lessons to myself. I never picked my head up and said, how do I interact with the world? How do I live with intention and with purpose? It wasn't even a thought that was in my reality. Like I didn't even know that that was something people did, because when I looked in that mirror, Juliet, that okay, I had to admit I'm unhealthy. I had to admit that I made a bunch of mistakes. I had to admit a lot of things. But the thing that kind of came crashing down on me was I don't think I cared about anything other than what I thought other people thought about me. You know,
Right.
like you worked hard because you had to for your boss. You did this because you had to for your wife. You did this because you had to for like you didn't do anything for you. Like you did it because you were looking for validation or love or all the stuff that you didn't have in your life. And it was just such a foreign concept to me to be like self-caring or intentional in my interaction with the world, that it was, I look back and I go, God, man, how could you have been that stupid? Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Right. But I think being that stupid and then being that aware is what then took you to your next phase of your life, and why you're
Mhm.
doing so many amazing things and big things. I mean, like, I know when we spoke, I was like, oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. There was like so many things that I would love for you to touch on. And welcome, Shelby and Tonya. It's so nice to see you guys here. And again, if you guys are listening and any of the other platforms, welcome to your next stop live. We have David Richman. He is an author, speaker, trainer, and consultant, and really excited to dive into kind of this next phase. And if you guys are just tuning in, David was in an abusive relationship, had 2 kids, was homeless at 18, but then rose up in the financial world, but was not very happy and not very healthy. And a lot of things kind of brought him to this point where his sister was diagnosed with terminal cancer. His 4-year-old basically said to him, can you not smoke? Because Aunt June is dying of cancer. And the teachers say that cigarettes cause cancer. When you actually, the way you described that, I can see you in the backyard, and it's almost like a movie. This little kid looking up at you saying, hey, can you not do that? Like, it's, I mean, is your daughter, because you said you had twins, is that
Yeah.
daughter still like blunt and frank and like it kind of, like, I
Yeah,
mean,
she's she
is that, it's just her personality.
she has no filter. She has no awareness of yeah, she's very blunt. She's very blunt. I used to say that it's like anybody that had kids, especially twins, like that they could be so different. Like I could look at Danielle and I could just go on a diatribe like, what the heck were you thinking? And why did you say that? And don't you realize you have to do blah, blah? And she would, like, 2 seconds later, be like playing in the yard, like all happy or whatever. If I looked sideways at my son, he'd be in a bad mood for 5 days, right? He was so sensitive and so aware of everything. She was just like, I'll just say whatever's on my mind. And one of the things I'm really grateful for is that whatever the cause, whatever the set of circumstances, um, is that I had about a week or two period in my life where I was able to absorb, like, the things that I needed to hear. I heard, like, for the first
Right.
time, you know, and I think when you are at your low, right? You're just. I don't even know if I had an acute awareness of that I was at this low. But when you're at your low, you have the ability to go searching. Like, you're searching for a reason to stay there. You're searching for a reason to get rid of it. You're just looking for something. And I had masked that looking for something into looking for things that led to bad behavior and bad decisions. And you know.
Right. And I want to say, because there's people that are going to think, okay, your low is like when you have no money, there's so many different things. You were, and if I'm wrong, you were successful financially, correct?
Financially, I was very successful. I had good friends. I mean, geez, I had a couple of boats, a couple of houses, a couple of cars, a couple of kids. I mean, what the heck? Like
Right.
who? But I was miserable and exceptionally unhealthy, and I mean, just the stress that I had. Everybody has stresses, right? And there's good stress and bad stress. Okay, good stresses really help you in life, right? I mean, they really help you. Being stressed out and being busy and doing all the things you love and balancing a busy life and all these positive stresses in your life, those are great.
Right.
Negative stresses were 100 times that, and were ready to smash me into the ground and say see you later. I mean, it was bad, right?
Right.
So you never know what people are going through. You never know what they have been through. And what I was hiding was, nobody would have guessed it. Nobody would have known, was just this absolute miserable, negative stress, horrible, nowhere to turn. Like I was just, morally desolate. Just, I had no direction, no understanding of the world, no understanding of how I interacted with it. And I had this responsibility, to my kids, obviously, to try to be strong for my sister. And then I discovered that it was okay to have a responsibility to myself. Again, I know that sounds stupid, but
No,
it's
not at all. Because I think
just
there's a lot of people that don't think like that they are where you were. I mean, I think a lot of people are where you were. They
yeah,
don't they don't look at themselves and they don't take responsibility for themselves. I mean, you weren't taking you were just living. You weren't like owning yourself.
absolutely not on purpose. And when I stood in front of that mirror, Juliet, I made a list. I go, okay, dude, and I talked out loud at times, and I looked like an idiot, but I just kept looking at myself and figuring it out and going, okay, here's the things that you're good at that you should lean into, and here's the things that you have to admit that are problems, and you got to fix these things, dude. Like you got, like now's your chance. Like now's pretty much your only chance, right?
Right.
And if you're going to reinvent yourself, you got to go all in. You got to do it right, and so you got to fix this, and this, and then over the next several days, maybe even coming weeks, I kind of refined that in my head, like a honest, blunt, a no holds barred, naked look at yourself, like on who you are, that you could be proud of, who you are that you can't be. And it's a hard place to be, especially later in life, because we're really good at fooling ourselves into who we think we are. And, like it's easy to be cynical. It's easy to be forlorn about what you haven't accomplished and opportunities you missed and all this stuff. I just made the list, and then I just said, all right, now you got to do something super important. And it's something I'd never done before in my life. And it was like, I said, dude, the only way you can go forward, if you just like have some compassion, like you tried your best, just let it go.
Right.
Just let it go. I mean, all right. So you effed up a million different ways. You made a million bad choices. You had a bunch of bad stuff happen. You just let it go, dude. Just have some compassion for yourself, and you did your best. You can do better. Like, just stop. Just let it go.
Right.
Which is
Now,
hard.
that's really hard. I mean, that's really hard. Now, were you in touch with your friend? Like, did your friend realize that his words really actually did something at this point, or were you still kind of digging yourself out of your hole and, connected
Yeah.
with him as like you kind of came to that next spot?
Yeah, it's really smart because sometimes you are in the moment aware of what's happening with change and with awareness and with the things that you're doing, and sometimes it just hits you later. I didn't know that I
Right.
was doing this, right. I didn't have a list on paper where I go check mark this and check mark that. Okay, now you stand in front of the mirror, and now you make a list, and now you forgive yourself, and now you start making little change. I no. It was just a process. And later on, I just remember looking back going, man, where would I be if Chris didn't tell me to do that? Right. And he
Right.
didn't say, go home and look in the mirror. He just said, why don't you fix your own problems? Right. And so that just sparked me, of course, into that action. So it's a great question, because no, I don't think I was conscious doing it until later. And then I could relate to the process, and then I could lean into that process and amplify it. you know?
And does he know? I'm sure he does now. Like that you start your story with your change, with what he said to you. And if you guys are just joining, can you explain again what he said to you? Because I think it's such a crazy, amazing analogy, and really
Yeah,
lets you see it.
yeah, it is. And and I wrote about it in my first book called Winning in the Middle of the Pack, which that kind of led to this idea of the middle of the pack, and we can get to that. But we were actually, this sounds rather bougie, but we were sitting on our boats across from each other, excuse me, and I was just complaining to him, and he stood up and he walked over and he goes, dude, he goes, I am so sick of hearing the same thing from you. He goes, every little problem is like that you have. Every bad person is like a wild animal. It's like a wild rabid animal. And you walk by it and you're like, oh, look at that. I can make it better. And you pick it up and you take it home and you wash it and you feed it and you make it look good and you feel it safe and you give it a good home and you do all this stuff. And then you go to pet it and it bites you. And you act all surprised that it bites you. And it's like, it's a wild animal, dude. That's what they do. They don't know any better. And I remember, I'm sorry if this sounds cruel, but I remember she said, dude, or he said to me, he goes, dude, your wife is just mean to the core. Like, she doesn't know any better. Why do you keep trying to make her something she's not? Like, you know better. Why don't you worry about you? Why don't you stop trying to fix problems you can't fix? Like, wild animals are wild animals. All the problems that you have in your life, dude, that's your choice. Look at you. What's your problem? And I'm like, I guess it made
Right. And
sense.
and you heard it that time. So I think that's amazing. So yeah, take us into now when you decided to write the first book. So this is because the first book came really after, like, your sister was diagnosed and
Yep.
then you started making
Yeah.
these changes. So take us through a little bit of that.
Yeah. 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 So what I did, and I still like to say, so if you, in my bio, I still like to put in there endurance athlete because I'm still an
Yes,
endurance
you are.
athlete. But
Last time I talked to you, you did
but,
some crazy stuff.
but yeah, but I said if you're going to start to worry about the guy in the mirror, first thing you're going to have to do is stop smoking, right, and
Yes.
start to lose some weight and start to be healthy. So I figured the only thing you could do is like I gotta run. Or I could become a runner. I don't know, what else do you do, right? So because if I don't stay busy, I'm gonna smoke. I'm gonna eat bad. So I said, all right, cool. So I raced to the shoe store and I go buy some running shoes and I'm like, okay, I'm a runner now. And I go home and I put on my running shoes and I go what would be a very, very, very slow jog. And I couldn't make it 2 minutes. I couldn't make it to the end of the road. And I just started beating myself up. You're a big loser. You're an idiot. Your life's already behind you. What the hell are you thinking? That same unkind voice that we have inside that tells us we're an idiot because we're not an expert at something or it doesn't come easy or we look like an idiot or, whatever. And then I go, no, just stop. Like, you can't smoke for 20 years and be 60 pounds overweight and expect to go win a marathon. Like,
Right.
take it easy. So the next day I ran, a minute more, and the next day and the next day. And then all of a sudden, 6 weeks later, I'm running a 5K. And then about 4 weeks after that, I go, well, heck, man, let's go do a triathlon. So I did a triathlon, and then a half marathon. And then in the summer, I started in February. Then in the summer, I did a half Ironman and then a full Ironman. And then I'm like, wow, man, like, you can do all of this stuff. And then I said, well, why don't you go do 2 Ironmans or 3 Ironmans? Why don't you go run 50 miles? Why don't you run 100 miles? And I just started saying, like, man, like this was a real draw for me. And so I turned to endurance athletics, which not only helped me cure my physical issues and my addictions and those type of things, but it really helped me rewire my brain because when you're alone, I know that you know this because you've interviewed people, have talked to you about this. When you're alone in your own head, singularly just doing some type of exercise or, going for a long walk or whatever, you really get to solve problems. And endurance athletics for me provided the exact perfect backdrop to fix my problems. It allowed me to rewire my brain, let me talk to myself nicer, let me strive for personal goals that mattered to me, and it was a wonderful, and still is a wonderful learning exercise.
Right. Now, how old were you? Because I know I'm going to have listeners being like, well, what the hell? How did he jump from this to this? I mean, you put the work in. And when we have addictive personalities, and this is
Yeah.
what, when people will say, like people have addictive personalities, you can have an addictive personality to something negative, or you can have an addictive personality to something positive.
Hmm.
And I think there's so much in both of those, and learning how to take your addictive personality and turn it into something that's going to be better for yourself, helping the world, doing things where you're learning is a really important thing, because sometimes people don't see that correlation. So, what age were you when you were like, okay, that first day where you took
Yeah.
that, when you tried to run up the street and you were like, crap, I'm out of shape?
Right. That I was 39 years old. 39.
Yeah.
And um it's stupid because now, nearly 20 years later, I've done 20 Ironmans. I've done, I don't even know how many 50-mile, 100-mile runs. And I was just I'm writing a guest chapter in a book. And I was writing about this memory of when would I think I'd be an athlete? So, at 39, I knew what athletes were. I certainly wasn't one. I was as far as you could be from an athlete. And then when I started on this journey and I started to get some awareness and perspective and understand what it takes, I go, what would be an athlete? And I go, yeah, you know what? If you just rolled out of bed one day and just went, yeah, today's the day I'm going to put on running shoes and go run 50 miles. Like, I didn't train for it. I didn't prepare. I just knew that any day I could get up and go run 50 miles, that would make me an athlete. And so I did that a few years into my thing. It was the middle of August, and I was in a bad mood, and I said, "Man, you want to solve your problem? Go prove if you're an athlete or not." And I got my shoes on, and I went for a 50-mile. I actually called the race director the night before, said, "Can I show up?" And he goes, "Yeah, all right, you'll show up, but if you haven't done any training, good luck." And it was a really tough race. And I did without any training, without any whatever. Like, I'm in my mid 40s and early to mid 40s, and could just pick up my shoes one day and say, let's take a drive and go drive 50 miles or go run 50 miles in the mountains. Like that, like,
Yeah.
and
That's an athlete. I mean,
that's an athlete, right? And
now,
so,
what happened afterwards though? Because like, what injuries did you endure? How sore were you? Like, what
oh, it was
happened to your
stupid.
body?
It was the hardest thing I've ever done. It was completely ridiculous. I've been fortunate that I haven't had any injuries, and I've run thousands and thousands and thousands of miles. I biked. I mean,
Right.
I went on a 5,000-mile bike ride, a solo bike ride just in 6 weeks. I mean, I've done some crazy, crazy stuff. I haven't had any injuries, but what's really ridiculous is, in business, I knew this, that you got to set your goals way, way, way higher, because the lower you set your goals, the more likely you are to achieve them. So why not set them higher? Because you're more likely to achieve them. Right. And that was an easy concept for me to understand in business. Right. But in personal life, I had no context for that. And so how do you go from not being able to run 2 minutes to picking up your shoes one day and just deciding I'm going to go run 50 miles? Just set that goal as a high enough goal. Like, that's a high freaking goal.
Yeah.
But if you set a high enough goal and you're willing to put in the work and you're willing to accept the pain and the sacrifice and the whatever, why not? Like, why can't you achieve it? Like, could I have won a gold medal at the Olympics? No. Okay, I wasn't going to set my goals so high that they were unachievable. But it's shocking how far you can push yourself if you're committed. It's shocking. Like, I used to tell people, I go, look, let me give you an example. Okay, let me give you an example. There's a 50-story building on one side of the road and a 50-story building on the other side of the road, and I'm going to put a ladder from the top of one to the other. And if you fall, you're toast, right?
Right.
And I'm going to give you $1,000,000 if you walk across. And they go, $1,000,000 not worth it to me. And then I say, okay, well, let me crank the wind up a little bit so it's a little more scary. And if you make it across, you don't have to work for the rest of your life. And they go, no, not worth it. I kind of like what I do. I'm not going to do it. Okay, well, let me make it rainy now and make it really slippery on that ladder, make it not good, and tie your 6-year-old kid to the middle of the ladder, and you got to go save him. It's like go, right?
Right.
Like you don't even give it a second thought. You're like done. So you just got
Right.
to find that thing that's that motivate ultimate motivator, and whatever it is, you won't even think about it. You just do it.
Well, and the other thing is that I think people don't give their bodies the credit. The human body is an amazing thing. It's usually our minds that hold us back, not
Yeah.
our physical bodies. Yes, there are people that have physical limitations, and that's not who I'm talking to right now. I'm talking to the average person that is healthy, that has now, yes, you might pull a muscle if you go out and run 50 miles, without doing any training, but you have to have the mindset and the determination to go do that. And I think that shows exactly what you did. And so, doing that is going to then, it's going to give you this high, right? Oh, wait, I just did that. What can I do next? What can I do next? How can I prove to myself that I am enough and that I can do things and I can go out there and really put my mind to something and change my life? And I think that that's exactly what you did and what you showed. So when did you start writing, winning in the middle of the
When,
pack?
well, winning in the middle of the pack. So I actually came up with the concept for it because this mindset changed in me on the very first like endurance race I ever did was a half Ironman. It was 5 months after quitting smoking. I was still pretty overweight. I was definitely not an athlete, and I said I'm going to go do this half Ironman. Okay, I had no business doing it, and I go there and I drive up and I'm very nervous because I don't know anything about. I've never done any of this long distance swimming, biking, or running stuff, but I'm going to go do a half Ironman. And it's a wave start. So they throw off different age waves, and I go to the start to go watch the people take off, and everyone, Juliet, they're like a Greek god and goddess. Like I'm just like where is the ounce of fat between any of them? And here I am, I'm still 30 pounds overweight. I do not look good in a Speedo, trust me. And I'm like, what the hell am I even doing here? I go, I don't belong here with these people. Like, what the hell? And I was this close to packing it up and saying, go home because this is not you. We have that unkind voice saying you don't belong here. You're not worth this. And this is not you. And all of a sudden the gun goes off right before I turn around to leave and go home and go back to whoever I'm never going to be. And the gun goes off, and of course, all the Greek athletes at the front, the Greek gods in the front, go swimming, down the river. Like wow, those are good. But my eyes go to the back of the race, and I'm like, well, what the hell? There's a dude like flipping on his back doing doggy paddle backwards, and another guy's like swimming in circles, and somebody else is like not wanting to go because you could tell they're afraid of the water. And I go, what the hell are they doing here? Wait, they don't care? Like they're just here to figure it out for themselves, and like okay, they might look good or they might they don't care what anybody thinks about them. They're just doing their thing. And I was like, you mean so you can kind of do stuff without worrying about what other people think? And so it was this middle of the pack concept. And the middle of the pack for me just became this thing where, at the front, everybody's watching. And at the back, everybody's kind of like, huh, like who's that 40-year-old living on their mother's couch in the basement? Like, I'm never going to be that guy. And I'm never going to be Oprah Winfrey, right? But I'm going to be somewhere in between. And in
Right.
between, isn't it nice that nobody cares? Like nobody's watching. You're just doing it for you. It's in the middle of the pack. And so it changed my mindset from I have to do stuff to I get to do stuff, or I can choose to do stuff. Nobody's forcing me to do anything. You don't like your job? Freaking stop. You don't like who you are? Change yourself. Like it just freed my mind to go, okay, you get to do all this stuff, not you have to. So the book just came as a result of the lessons I had learned in business, which there are a lot of parallels to those lessons in endurance athletics, and then thrown in with a couple of lessons from life stories because there was a lot of parallels.
That's awesome. When did you take the pivot from your corporate job that you did not like? Like, so
Mhm.
where was that in this, from the book, from when you started stop smoking, running, and all of that?
Yeah. So reality is life is expensive, and So I did a couple years later leave that job, but I'm still in the industry. I still am very fortunate to work for and now a better company, and that helps pay the bills for sure. And I'm very fortunate because it's a great company. But I accepted the fact that I could have balance in my life
Right.
and priorities, and you know, I write all the time. I'm always coming out with new books. I take time for all the important things in my life. I do a lot of charitable work. I do expressive writing workshops. I still do tons of endurance athletics. I just have a lot more balance, right?
Well, but here's the thing, you found your
Yeah.
passion. So you also
Yeah.
found the thing that you were passionate about and what you were supposed to be doing, but
Hmm.
you also took the job that you worked so hard into becoming super successful, but it wasn't really about the job. If I'm hearing you correctly, it really wasn't about the job, it was about you. It wasn't about that you hated your job so much because of what you were doing from day to day. It was
Hmm.
more of where you were day to day. And so that's one thing that people need to think about, because you can be in a job that you really don't truly love. And I always say to people, like, you're never in the wrong. I don't, I think every path that everyone's in, you're learning something from there. So I really don't ever think that, like, people will say, oh, but I was in the wrong job there. That's not what I was meant to do. It maybe wasn't what you were meant to do for your whole life, but it was what you were meant to do at that moment. And I think that that's really important. So what you were taking out of where you were and what you were learning, it was really because of who you were and what your struggles, personal struggles were, that was making everything else suck, right? In
Absolutely.
layman terms.
Absolutely, right? I mean, think about it. If you're in a bad relationship, it doesn't mean that you don't like people. This means you're in a bad relationship. If you have a bad meal, it doesn't mean you're going to stop eating, right? It doesn't mean you hate food. It's just it was a bad meal. So yeah, I was. I know. Again, I don't want to sound a trite, but I was just an unhappy person because I didn't have my purpose figured out. I didn't have any intentional interaction with the world around me. I didn't look at anything as a choice. I looked at everything as a burden or as a accidental result of circumstances. Nothing, like I didn't have control over anything. And if I did, I was faking it, right?
Right.
Right. I only did it because that's where I was, and I had to do it because that's what people wanted me to. Whatever. I never just felt like purposefully interacting with the world, like trying to be my best self. Like that, those were just not concepts that I would have even heard, let alone understood.
Right. Right. So now I want to get into the second book
Hmm.
and your sister's journey and where that kind of all led.
So way back when we were talking about that like moment in the mirror and those few days period, well, it turns out that she had terminal brain cancer, and it just hit me as I finally started to have this awareness, Juliet, that I got to worry about the guy in the mirror, and that I could worry about the guy in the mirror, and then I got to make all these choices instead of have to. I saw this long road ahead of me, this big journey, this like, wow, man, like finally I could start living. Like, wow, this is great. And I just, endless. I just saw these endless possibilities, and which was great, especially after I kind of forgave myself and said, okay, just go about it with a fresh heart and a fresh mind. It was a very optimistic, wonderful place to be. And then here she is at the same time living a wonderful life, a great marriage, great circle of friends, just wonderful, wonderful life. And her journey was going to be very short. And it really hit me. We had a lot of talks. I was very observant. I think I slowed down I was always very observant, but I kind of slowed down and try to understand the meaning behind the things that I was observing. And one of the things that hit me, Juliet, was that whether it was caregivers, doctors, friends, loved ones, whatever, over the time in which I saw her go through what she was going through and doing some endurance events to raise money and interacting with a lot of people, I realized that there was a common theme going on with cancer, especially, but around trauma, where people were equipped to deal with the tasks related to their cancer. How do I navigate work? How do I get insurance? How do I eat better? But they couldn't handle the emotional side of it. And even people that were super close, like they didn't talk about the emotional side of it. And I was just like, why? Like, why is that? And I went on a quest not to find the answers, but just to get some insight into that dynamic. And that was the start of the second book.
Right. And I mean, I think it is so important because you're right. And I think, and you'll know better, but I've had some family members that have had cancer, and you don't want to ever talk about, okay, well, what if you don't make it out of this? Because you don't want it to bring the negative, because you know how positive energy and positive attitudes really are so much in someone's journey and someone's fight, right? They need to stay positive. They need to know that they can do this, and they can win, right? They can fight it. They can beat it. And so when you took this, watching your sister go through it, and I think it's such an observation that you said, like, right, you are now coming out and being like, okay, I want to live a long life. I want to be better. And then you see your sister who, in your eyes, has a great life, and that's going to be taken from her. I mean, that has to be really, really hard to navigate. So you decide to do what? And as you wrote this book, like,
So what really was the major seed that was planted was that we had made this kind of agreement between us, June and I. She was getting near the end, but there was an event where it was a 24-hour event there where you put a team together, you get out on a track, you walk around the track for 24 hours. It's educational, it's informational, you get to honor people and remember people and whatever. And she said, dude, just drag me out, put me on a lounge chair, and let me just watch the team, and I'll cheer for them. And I just want to be there the whole time. And I said, well, geez, man, I mean, you're right on death's door, dude. You don't look good. You're not going to make it like too much longer than that. If you're going to do that, I will go run the whole 24 hours. Like, I'll be out there on the track the whole 24 hours waving at you. And unfortunately, she died like 2 days before the event, so she didn't get to go.
oh,
But I did, and a lot of other people did. And I said, I made a promise. I'll be there for the whole 24 hours. And in that raw emotional time frame, I just watched people. I just watched them. And that just became this overriding thought in my head. It's like, why are they not able to talk to the emotion about it? So then as I talked to my editor, I posed the question of, why is it so hard to start the conversations around the emotional side of cancer? I said to her, how can I go about this? And we came up with this idea that there didn't really exist any books that talked to multiple people, multiple different cancers, different ages, different emotional responses, different types of cancer one and done, 5 times cancer. Like, I just wanted to hit every aspect of it. And the way that I thought about it was this, Juliet, as I said, I can understand traumas like abuse, abandonment, drug addiction, making bad choices in life, these kind of things. Like, I can understand the traumas that we all have as young adults and as kids, but I don't understand that trauma. How did those other traumas affect us later in life? How like being abandoned as a kid, how did that affect your ability to bond with others during their time of need, right? I just wanted to try to figure out what that was. So uh, uh, literally, I just went searching for people that had interesting stories, evocative, inspiring, like kind of like jaw-dropping stories about life, and then also about cancer. And I said, let me interview them. So I found dozens of people that were just remarkable, inspiring, like totally like, wow, out there, just knock you on your butt listening to them stories. And I talked to them for a couple of years. And I got super, super deep into the darkest hallways of their minds of, who are you? How do these traumas affect you? What can we learn from knowing how they did? What's been your limiters? What's been amplified because of it? They and if you could do it over, how would you do it? Just everything, A to Z, on the emotional side of cancer.
right. And that had to been, I mean, you were also at that kind of point. I mean, you just lost your sister. So you were able to also relate with these people. And I'm sure that made it that much harder, but then also that much more meaningful because you had just kind of experienced that. Now, was this when you took the 5,000
Yeah.
mile. But so this is what you, so this is the part I was like waiting for you to say. And I was like, wait a second, I'm almost positive he did this on his bike. So,
Right. So well, here's what I did: is I interviewed people for a couple of years, but I hadn't met them. I interviewed them on the phone because I
right,
wanted to have a safe space for them to talk without being judged, without being self conscious, and clearly, some people weren't able to open up, and also I wasn't able to get. Deep enough with people because I had my own. I'm not a professional. Like this is not therapy or anything, but even as a writer, I couldn't break through some of the barriers that they had, and neither could they. So some people just went by the wayside, but there ended up being 15 people whose stories were just insanely remarkable. And I said, clearly we're all connected by emotion, right? We have the same basic emotions, and we're all connected by that, right? The second thing we're connected by is stories. Who doesn't lean in when you say, I mean, this is what you do for, what I mean, you find a good story, you just lean into it, right?
yeah,
So who doesn't lean into a good story? So if we're connected by story and we're connected by an emotion, why don't what the hell? I'll just get on my bike and just go meet these people for the first time because that'll connect the stories. So I just said, let's connect them. So I made a route and I zigzagged my way from California through Texas, down to Florida. I went down to the Moffitt Cancer Center in Tampa, Florida, and then over to Orlando, and then I zigzagged my way all the way up to New York City. And I did it in just 6 weeks, and I met thousands of people along the way, and obviously as many of the book participants as I could get on my route. And 6 weeks later, I realized that I did not make this dynamic up. There wasn't a single day, Juliet, not a single day that I didn't run into multiple people who could identify with this thing of, I don't know what the hell to say.
right.
What
Yeah.
do you say?
And now when you got this idea for Cycle of Lives, how did you connect with the people? Did you research? Did you, someone say, oh, you should talk to, did you have friends and family putting you in contact with people? Or was this something that you went out and found people yourself? Did you contact hospitals? Can you take us through that journey a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, and thank you for that question because I was very fortunate in that I was very vocal. I put out to what I really wanted: evocative, inspiring, very stark, moving stories. But I wanted to also identify with the person. Like, how can you do those two things? So I had to really put out a lot of feelers, and some of those
Right.
feelers were I cold called hospitals, I cold called cancer centers. Who do you know? Who do you know? Who do you know? And then if they gave me the highlight of the story, and I kind of was like, what the hell is even that? Then I was like, oh, maybe that's somebody I got to talk to. An example was, somebody that I knew at work called me up and said, hey, I heard about this project, and I have this childhood friend, and she's dealing with terminal brain cancer right now, and it's pretty tough, and blah, 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 blah. And the 6 kids, she's been married for 25 years. And she gave me the whole story. And I went, okay, that sounds interesting. I should talk to her. She goes, yeah. And she goes, man, you're not going to believe her reaction when she first heard she had a grapefruit-sized tumor in her brain. And I go, what was her reaction? And she goes, yeah, she just cried tears of gratitude. It was the best news she had heard. And I go, get them out of here. I'm like,
Right.
what the hell is even that? I got to talk to this person. So I found out that she was unimaginably grateful to hear that news. And you go, that's not possible. That's the kind of stories I wanted to have. Or I remember I had another friend say, "Oh, my son is marrying literally the happiest, most grounded, most beautiful, optimistic woman ever. She just became a pediatric oncology nurse. She's the sweetest, most incredible girl ever. She's the happiest person ever." And could you imagine? She lost her dad to cancer when she was 6, and grew up, really without her dad. She's the happiest person in the world. I'm like, how's that even possible? You know? And
Right.
so I
Yeah.
just found these stories that were just, I could relate to them once I got into the story, but they were just really like, wow, I gotta figure this out. I gotta find out what's going on here.
Okay, so I need to go back to the person with the grapefruit, and you
Yeah.
might say, no, you go get the book and finish reading it. But was she grateful because she had like pain and she was having problems and she couldn't figure
I'll,
out
I'll,
why?
yeah. a spoiler alert is okay because it's really a touching story. And why it's touching is because it just goes to the thought of you just don't know what people are going through or what they have gone through.
Right.
You just don't know. And I don't care if you look at somebody and you think you should feel pity, you should maybe feel exactly the opposite. And if you look at somebody else and go, man, they are living such a charmed life. And oh, if I could only be them, it might be likely is exactly the opposite. So her story in a nutshell is very, very successful, very smart, really great husband. She and her husband met. They had a ton in common. They get married. They have a couple of kids. They have a couple of more. Life is great. They're just living the greatest life ever. Finally, they have a little girl, and it's like they wanted to have a little girl. And I don't know, about 6 months before a certain cure for a certain disease came along, at 18 months old, their little girl died. And it's absolutely tragic. It's unbelievably tragic. But they went about their lives and went to go rebuild their marriage and stay good for the for the 4 kids that were there. And then at 49, she gets pregnant again, and it's a little girl. And the little girl comes out, and she's a perfect little angel. And it's like they are just living on cloud nine. I mean, they're the happiest, most fortunate people ever. But she, after the kid becomes a few years older, she starts to kind of change, and she's going through a change of life or something. And she's just not. She's angry, and she's not patient, and she's getting mean to her husband, and she's mean to her kids, and she's bitter about life, and she's just not the kind of person that she wants to be, and she's becoming more and more angry and even violent and just making no sense. And she's seeing her life crumble around her. Her kids, her marriage, her family relationships, and she's just getting deeper and darker into this angry, mean, bitter place that the world sucks and, whatever. And then in a moment of clarity, Juliet, years into this battle against herself and her family and her husband and throwing her arms up, she just said, "It's me, dude." She looked at her husband and she said, "It's me. I'm crazy. I'm literally crazy. Like, throw me in a mental institution. Please, save me. Just throw me in a mental institution." And they did. And when they did a battery of tests on her. And the head physician called up her husband and said, "You need to get down here right now. We found a grapefruit-sized tumor, and we have to immediately remove it. We're wheeling her into surgery inside of the next 10 hours. We've amassed everybody we can find. I don't know if she'll make it, but you have to come here and you have to wake her up and tell her what's happening." And so when he drove to the hospital and the mental institution, and he leaned in and he looked at her and he said, "Listen, here's what's going on. And I don't know if you're going to make it." She's like, "Thank God it's a tumor."
Right. Because she didn't know why she was losing her mind.
It's not me.
Right.
And you go, wow. Like I could relate to that. I could relate to that.
Now, did she make it after the surgery?
She did. She made it out of the surgery, and she got to really bond with her kids and with her husband and with her mom and with her sisters. And it was really a wonderful story. I got to talk to her mom, and I got to talk to a couple of her sisters, and certainly her husband. She didn't make it much longer than that. And there's a beautifully touching story about butterflies and transforming. And it's a really remarkable story. But no, she didn't make it much longer than that. But she definitely went away very grateful and very, very settled.
And those are the kind of stories that, and I say it all the time, stories connect us. So can you please tell everyone, and your website is here, david-richmond.com, but can they find your books there? And then I'm sure everywhere else?
Everywhere books are sold. And this book, and look, not to scare anybody off, it's not all about death and dying, right? There's a lot of inspirational, uplifting, wonderful, inspiring stories that you're going to be moved to say, oh, that's going to give me another tool to talk to people about. But one of the things I decided to do with this book was to give 100% of the proceeds to the cancer-focused charities that the book participants chose. So if you buy the book through the website or through Amazon or Barnes and Noble or bookstore or whatever, any dollar that comes in goes out to these charities. So there's a positive to it as well.
I love that. So Chris in the audience has something he wants to ask you or add. Chris, please join us.
Thank you so very much. Appreciate it. And thank you for a great, not just interview, but inspirational time together. I'm on the campus of a local community college I attend, and I'm on the football field doing my stretches and exercises. And I love stories like this because when I first came out here 4 months ago, I couldn't walk 20 yards. And now I've been able to walk the length of the field twice, etc. So thank you for the encouragement. I was curious, is the book available on audiobook?
I got to tell you something, Chris, and thank you for asking. One of the greatest things I've ever done is I have a friend who owns a voiceover company. He goes, dude, this book needs to be on Audible. And I go, oh, it's an investment. My publisher. Blah, blah, blah. He goes, I got you. We hired 15 different actors to each play one of the 15 people, read the stories. So the Audible is absolutely spectacular. I do so the book is 15 stories, but in between the 15 stories is a little narrative of the bike ride and the amazing people I met. And then, me dealing with grieving with over my sister and that type of stuff. So the transitions are short. I read those transitions, but I have 15 actors, each read one of the 15 people in the book, and the Audible is unbelievable. I mean, I love it. So thanks for asking. Get it.
And I'm going to be going to get that because I have to listen. I have to listen. I think I shared you because I'm dyslexic. So it takes me forever to read, or I get really tired and I fall asleep. So it doesn't matter how good the content is, just the way my brain works. So I have to listen to all my stuff. And so I'm excited to jump out and get that. And Chris, I'm really proud of you. I'm really proud of you. I know that we've talked before, and I think that is amazing that you are on that journey yourself.
It's a long journey. It takes a lot of steps, and thankfully there's a lot of naps in between.
Naps are awesome, aren't they?
Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Chris. So David, this is exciting. And so I know we're coming to an end. I know we started a little bit late, but I know we're coming to an end. And one of the things I said to you when you talked about, all the miles in 6 weeks, I said because I think I've asked you this and I talked about it before because I played 2 sports in college. I know what it is like to train. How was that recovery after being on your bike? I think I asked you, I said, I know we just met, but how badly did your butt hurt?
It's so funny how everybody asks that because let me just tell you something. Being on a bike for 6 weeks, and I was on a bike, Juliet, just over 11 hours a day, 41 out of 45 days, as much as 17 hours a day, pushing solo into the wind. There's nothing that feels good about it, especially if you're not a quote unquote athlete, right? I do athletic stuff, and I look at myself as an athlete, but I'm not riding the Tour de France, dude. You know what I'm saying? Like those are athletes. It hurt. It hurt. And it took me about a year. It took me about a year till I felt okay again. I still did events and I still trained and I still did, but I had a deep fatigue that just for about a year didn't go away. But I actually like that because if you're going to do something epic, if you're going to do something that is just way beyond what you ever imagined your previous self could ever imagine you could do, it's going to hurt, man. It's going to. And it's going to be difficult and it's going to require sacrifice and you're going to feel selfish and ashamed that you're doing it at times. And you're going to be proud of yourself. But it's a big deal. If you're going to do something epic, it's going to have epic effects on you. And sometimes it's going to hurt, man. It's lean into it and go, okay, just accept that fact. So as much as I go, it hurt, hurt. It was really hard. Okay. I still have PTSD because I did most of the miles on the highways. And if I hear trucks riding behind me when I'm on a bike, it scares the crap out of me. So emotionally, I'm still not perfect, but physically I'm back to it.
Right now. And so I'm also dying to know, how old are the kids What ages are your
So my
kids right
kids
now?
are 25 now. They're almost 25. They're going to be 25 soon. So they've seen me as not a smoker for 20 years, and they've known me now as an endurance athlete, which is cool. And they might have heard 10 million times too many times. You know, to get to. You don't have to do your homework. You
Right.
get to, right? Some
Right.
people don't get a chance to go to school. You don't have to go for a bike ride. You get to. Some people don't have legs. You don't have to
Right.
do this. You get to. So they know me as the get to guy, right? Because it's like everything you do, you get to do. Stop whining. Just go about it.
It's so true. And I love that. And it's so funny because now, like, that I'm on the journey that I've been, my kids will always say to me, "Oh, what life lesson are you teaching us now?" And I'm like, it's not all about, and it is, everything is kind of a life lesson. I'm like, okay, what did we learn from that? And they're like, oh, and I have 3 teenagers. So they don't always appreciate the life lessons. But David, I thank you so much for joining Your Next Stop Live. I think your story is remarkable. Guys, go. Winning in the Middle of the Pack is also available, but David's new book is Cycle of Lives. David also is a speaker. He's a trainer. If you have any questions on how to do what he does, he has done everything from not the correct way to the correct way. So he's able to help you kind of go through all of those paths, which is really cool. Because some people just, they become coaches and trainers because they, yes, they failed and made wrong decisions. But I feel like you kind of just dove in with 2 feet, no life jacket. And we're like, I got to figure this out because I'm at such a low in my life that I don't have any other choice. And so that's where I am. So I appreciate you joining Your Next Stop Live on Fireside and sharing your story.
Oh, thanks for having me, Juliet. I know we could talk for a lot longer, and we're out of time, but
we're going to have you back on. We're going to have you back on because I was just thinking that because I know just anyone, we were a little late because I did not give David the cues that this was on the phone. I thought we had talked about it before, but I didn't. So we were on the computer, and then so he had a whole setup, his whole podcast setup. So he's like completely out of his comfort zone, but I think he probably does that best because I think he's out of his comfort zone a lot and knows how to kind of go through that. So I appreciate you.
Well, thank you. But I'm also grateful that people like you even care, right? To bring inspirational, evocative, life lesson type stories to an audience because without you knowing how to ask questions, without you having a passion for what you're doing, doesn't give people like me, any attention or opportunity to talk. So I definitely appreciate you. So thank you.
You too, David. And again, we will have you back and we'll have where we can really get people coming up and asking questions and we'll work that all out. So we will see you guys soon. And again, thank you so much for joining Your Next Stop Live here on Fireside. I'm so glad there's some exciting music before. It was a little slow when I was trying to get the